Thank you, Alexis. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us, and we are very happy to be able to be given this opportunity to be with you today to share information and to really give you an opportunity to ask questions from PennDOT regarding our responsibilities towards the state's vast network of state and local bridges. So just to give it some context, some scale, if you will, Pennsylvania is home to over 25,400 state-owned bridges. So that means that PennDOT's responsible for the maintenance of all of these bridges as well as their safety inspections. Additionally, PennDOT has oversight responsibilities of the 6,600 locally owned bridges in Pennsylvania that are over 20 feet in length. So this includes the monitoring to ensure that they're inspected timely, that reports are provided to the local bridge owner, and to collaborate with those bridge owners on any required work that might be necessary coming out of those inspections. So PennDOT's also responsible for submitting condition data to the Federal Highway Administration. Generally, bridges are inspected every 2 years. Some bridges, such as those that have weight restrictions, are inspected once a year or more frequently if bridges are in poor condition. So PennDOT conducts around 18,000 bridge inspections every year. So to give you a sense, that's about 70 each workday, which are performed by under the direction of trained and qualified inspectors. Now, if a bridge needs to be weight restricted, the load rating of a bridge is conducted by a bridge engineer under the direction of a professional engineer in Pennsylvania. So a quick word about the condition rating. We've talked about those a few times. So bridge conditions are based on a scale from 9 to 0, based on the National Bridge Inspection Standards, which really are followed by all the states. That's a federal criteria. Now, each component of the bridge, so the deck, the superstructure, the substructure, or culvert, if that's the case, is given a rating. The bridge as a whole then is classified by the lowest component condition rating for either the deck, the superstructure, substructure, or the culvert. So when you're looking at that range, so condition ratings of 7 to 9 means that the bridge is considered in good condition, and that's on a good, fair, poor condition classification system. Condition ratings that are 5 or 6 are classified as fair condition, and a condition rating of 4 or lower means that deterioration or at least one structural component is advanced and the bridge is classified as being in poor condition. Now, inspectors, when they're out there, they provide documentation and photographs to structural engineers who then review the deterioration that is seen. The structural engineers confirm the assigned condition rating. They perform a load rating analysis to determine the load or weight that is the capacity of the bridge. And then they compare those results to previous studies to determine if the capacity has changed and determine what other actions must be taken. If conditions warrant, the bridge owner will either make immediate repairs to the bridge, schedule them for repairs, or take temporary actions, for example, shoring up a weakened section or restricting traffic from critical areas, or posting a weight restriction to keep the bridge open until those repairs can be made, or close the bridge until the repairs can be made, again, depending on those conditions. So bear in mind that these condition ratings are only used to generally categorize bridge conditions and provide a global view for planning really for those transportation improvements. So similar to evaluating a person's overall health, a bridge condition is just far too complex to really be fully described with 3 condition ratings. So just keep that in mind. In Pennsylvania, we are certainly an old state with an old infrastructure. Just to give you a little bit of history on the bridges and their condition and where we've been. In 2008, there were over 6,000 state-owned bridges that were in poor condition in Pennsylvania. We've made tremendous progress in reducing that number. So today, that number is just over 2,400 bridges for the state-owned system. But because of the age of our bridge network and the size of our network, 250 just of our state maintained bridges move into that poor category every year. So we must preserve, repair, and replace at a greater rate each year to continue our trend of reducing that number of bridges that are in the poor condition. So we're thankful that the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, including new funded especially for bridges, and that's included funds for off-system bridges as well. So over 5 years, we're going to be receiving $1.6 billion in new federal funds through the new bridge funding system. And these funds will certainly help, and we've been working with our planning partners to put those in good use. We certainly have needs all across the state. But even with these new federal funds, we have a large gap between our available funding and the needs of our system. So that means that PennDOT and our partners, we need to prioritize those projects based on the funds that we do have available. So now we'll continue to advocate for sustainable transportation funding in Pennsylvania to keep our network safe. And now I'll turn things back over to Alexis for the question and answer portion of the program.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay. So as a reminder, please stay muted until your name is called. We're going to call on folks in the order that RSVPs were received, and we do have a whole lot of people on today. We're going to try to get through as many as we can, so please have your question ready. If I call your name and you don't have a question, just say no question so we can move on to the next person. Also, as a note, that I saw a question in the chat about recording. There is going to be a PACast link available that you can download the recording from after this afternoon. So we're going to go to our first question, and that is Jan Murphy from PennLive. Jan, do you have a question? Okay, we'll move on to our next person, and that's Matt Hicks from the Daily and Sunday Review. Matt, do you have a question today? Okay, next is WTAJ, Travis Gary, or anyone from WTAJ with a question? Okay, next we'll go to Paul or any reporters from the Pittsburgh Business Times with a question.
Yeah, hi, it's Paul Goff from the Pittsburgh Business Times. You can hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks for taking the time. Question, how do you determine what bridges get fixed and on what timeline? How are they prioritized? And then what are some of the factors, and what will the new federal funding do to improve upon that, you know, with this new influx of cash, the 1.6 in the new federal budget over 5 years?
Thanks, Paul. Melissa, do you want to take that one?
Yep, I sure will. And I'll allow Mike if he wants to add in a little bit. But it's a complicated actually question. A lot of it depends on what exactly is needed for that particular bridge. Sometimes it's appropriate that we'll have to look at, I'll say, temporary repairs until a larger, we're looking at that bridge population. If it's getting to the point where it's close to needing replacement, there might not be those funds available to immediately get that on the program. So you might have to look at short-term repairs. But then as far as those long-term, how do we get those funded for, let's say, a full replacement? We work with our planning partners across the state. We have 26 of those. And we work with those, and what are those priorities? We're looking at what's the traffic that's using that route. Again, what's the condition of the bridge? A lot of different factors go into what's going to make that a regional priority. Is it used by emergency management personnel? Is it on a route to a hospital? So it's certainly complex, but we would use the same process with the federal dollars when we're looking at those bridge systems. So we're going to be going out, working with our partners again and say, okay, with this additional funding, what are those other priorities that we haven't been able to get on the program? Maybe we've done some of those temporary fixes, but now with additional funding, we can get to those permanent fixes, if you will, by replacing the bridge or significant rehabilitation. That's generally how we approach those.
Yeah, Melissa, I'll just jump in and add too. Again, I agree. The planning partners are very much key to the process. The traffic volumes, which you talked about. We also look, also, is there any other detours in the area or alternate routes? I guess it would be a better term in the area, that when you're looking at how do you handle, all the needs out there in an area, that would come into play as well. And then finally, sometimes as we're looking at very large improvements, there's some off-system improvements that we want to do ahead of time so we can better manage the traffic.
Thank you both. Next, we're going to go to Thomas Fitzgerald from the Inquirer. Tom, do you have a question?
Sorry. Yes, thanks, Alexis, and thanks, Melissa and Mike, for doing this. I guess I have a general question about public perception, and that is, if people are concerned about bridges in their area and as they're going over them and as media report on these ratings, I mean, what should they think about, you know, is this safe? When should they worry or be reassured?
Yeah, I can get that one started. Thanks for the question, and it's an important one. We do have a very rigorous process in place that we do evaluate those bridges to make sure they're safe. Just because they say poor doesn't mean that there's something significantly wrong with that bridge that's putting them in jeopardy. We do go through, like I said, the inspection process itself. We do have processes in place if there's something that's emergency. You know, there's actions that have to be taken within set timeframes. We use a tiered system. So, you know, the first tier we use that, hey, this is something that has to happen within 3 days. You know, next tier is it has to be something that's repaired in 6 months. And then they'll get into recommendations that go longer in time. But it's a very, I'll say, a rigorous analysis. That's why we use the bridge posting, if you will, where we put the weight restrictions on what it can carry. Now, I will say that it's very important that we get, I'll say, cooperation from everybody that uses that system. So if we have a bridge posted for 10 tons, that, you know, we have those heavier vehicles that stay off the bridge, because that certainly has a detriment to the structure. So with regard to the public, just again, this is a federal program. It is a very well-established program, and we constantly learn from what's happened in other areas as well. So, you know, if something has happened in Florida, we hear of a concern that's happened, you know, we bring that back to Pennsylvania and put that into practice immediately. That's really the purpose of the safety evaluation that's going on now from the NTSB, so that, you know, whatever is found, the cause certainly is not known, but whenever that is found, that information can be shared across the country to prevent similar situations.
Yeah, Melissa, again, I'll just jump on and add, you know, first of all, again, you know, the public should be very much assured that we're doing everything we can to make sure our infrastructure is very safe. Outside of the normal business too, you know, there's a lot of folks that carry heavy loads across our highways. So we have a pretty robust permit process in place, you know, to make sure the heavy loads are obviously routed in the correct direction. And again, as Melissa said, you know, any kind of event at all triggers a common response for our industry, and maybe boiling it down to a local level. You know, we have a lot of storms throughout the year. We get some flooding issues, so we have a list of scour critical bridges, you know, associated with that. So after those events, that's just one more item that triggers our teams to be out there and again, just assuring that everything's safe and passable.
Thank you both. Next, we'll go to Stacy Wesco or anyone from Lehigh Valley Business. Okay. Leon from Explore Clarion. Next would be Sean Hamill from the Post-Gazette.
Yeah, thank you. You both have made comments about the weight limits and how you're trying to route heavy vehicles to the right place. I'm wondering if you could talk more about that and some of the discussions that would occur when you're setting a weight limit on a bridge. Would you, for example, consider the impact of a regional transit authority and its buses? Would that play any role? So for example, if it was a major route and you didn't want to prevent buses from going over a bridge, would that be taken into account in the weight limit that was set? Especially if, you know, those buses, you know, at certain times of day could have many, many more tons on it, right? If they're full versus curb weight. Is that a factor in setting the weight limit? And how important is that discussion among partners? Or is it, as you initially said, is it just based on a load limit calculation by an engineer? Or do they take it to other parties to discuss what the weight limit's going to be?
You want me to start off with that one, Melissa? Again, very good question, Sean. And you know, when we do the load analysis, it's really setting what we feel is a safe, you know, weight limit restriction on the bridge. So, Once that weight limit restriction is set, then any kind of vehicle that falls under that obviously would be part of that process. So to the point where do we consider the regional transit authorities and things like that? I would say that just falls under the bigger umbrella. Now, what we can do and what we do in certain circumstances is, this is a product of not only the heavy load, but the number of heavy loads that go across the bridge as well. So, we often get in discussions with local municipalities, especially for bridges that are posted just a little bit lower. How about our fire trucks? How about things like that? Even winter services, obviously, we got to be careful of. So, routinely, if a vehicle goes across the bridge that's a little bit over the weight limit, there's enough redundancy in our calculations that's not going to be an issue, but it's the volume of those. So you can't have it significant high number of those. So I'll let Melissa jump in here next for any comments she may have.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Mike. I think the way I want to say that is when we're setting that weight restriction, we're not considering, who's using it or anything like that. We are truly determining what's safe to pass. Now, as a result of that load rating, we might have to reach back out to, like, say, a transit provider or even a school or whoever might use that bridge to see if we can work on ways to resolve, whether it be detouring, changing those routes as a result of that posting. But it's not factored into what that load rating should be. That's a structural analysis based on the conditions of the bridge and what's seen by that structural engineer as to what really is that limit that it can safely hold, as Mike said. Now, keeping in mind, there's always factors of safeties that are included into all the engineering calculations that are being done.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up?
We have so many folks, we'll try to get through as many as we can. Then if you want to pass your follow-up along later. Sorry, Sean.
Thank you.
Next would be Fox 29 or Chris Durkin or anyone from Fox 29. Okay, the next would be KDKA.
Yeah, there are 6 K design bridges across the state, I'm told. Has PennDOT put out any sort of advisory to the host municipalities about that design and short of shutting them down?
I can go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Yeah. Very good question. I actually have the list pulled up in front of me right now. So again, minus the one that we've been talking about here over the last week, there's 5 others. I can let you know that we've been out there. We've taken a look at all of those. If it's not done at this point in time, they will be done by tomorrow. But again, I would say the good news there is these other 5 bridges are in a little bit better condition, and most of them are fair or good, and none of them have postings or restrictions on them. So there's, again, no concern with those other bridges. Obviously, we have one local bridge in Allegheny County, another one in Philadelphia, and then the other 3 are state-owned bridges.
Will the new design not be a K design?
I think that's probably, we're still working out what that is, but I'll just put it this way. I do not think we're going to be using a K design in that restructure. They have actually become very expensive. And either way, we will be, that's a 2-girder system, which is, it doesn't have the internal redundancies, we'll say, and we'll probably be looking at, for the replacement structure, to be a multi-girder. So it will have some internal redundancies.
Thank you both. Becky Locke, Juniata Sentinel. Okay, Eric Shikitano from CNHI.
Hey, it's Eric. I was just curious if there's been an uptick in the past week of reports from local municipalities expressing concern about bridge conditions.
I can get that one started. I don't know of any specific outreach from local municipalities concerning the concerns with their bridges. Just as we're having discussion here, I think there has been a lot of media attention and concern, just overarching, looking into the condition of our bridges. But I can't say specifically that municipalities are reaching out about specific bridges. Mike, I don't know if you had anything to add.
No, I agree, Melissa. I think it's a conversation all of us are having, but no specific issues have come in us since the event.
Thank you both. Jessica Babb, CBS 21.
Hi, yes. So you mentioned that just because a bridge has a poor rating doesn't necessarily mean there's something significantly wrong with it. It's just kind of a general category to put it in. What would be those more significant or serious indicators that something was really wrong with the bridge?
The scale for poor includes from 0 to 4. So if you're getting to the lower end of that score, could mean you have more serious deterioration going on. Sometimes, we have had it where we've had bridges that are struck, which can immediately threaten the integrity of the structure itself, or at least the beam. So those would be the ones that usually rise to that immediate attention, I'll say, where there has been something that significantly impacts the structural integrity of a major element. When we talked about the different elements, normally that would be in the superstructure or something in the substructure, so something that's holding that bridge up overall. But a bridge strike is probably the easiest one to think about, where there can be physical damage to that bridge that really does, like I said, threaten that integrity of it. But that's why we do that regular inspection. So we monitor those conditions so that we are aware if something gets to the point where it then is really threatening that integrity itself, if you will.
Thank you. Andrew Scott at the morning call.
Yes, hi. Thanks again for having us, everyone. A couple of questions that I have. Number one, I was just curious, why were certain bridges built as K-frame with single support construction in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll get this one started off. These were used a lot in ravine situations where there was a large gap, and it was that the slopes come up rather rapidly because the support areas are at the abutments, which are at the far end, and then these two piers that were designed into that main beam, if you will, in such a way that it's on the hillside. So they're really using that hillside, if you will, as to support those main legs. Now, over time, the cost of being able to fabricate bridges that way with the leg that came out at an angle as opposed to a straight vertical has certainly increased in time. So they've certainly decreased, I'll say, in uses. But that was the original one. Mike, I'll let you add in if there's anything I missed for why kind of those K-frames were used originally.
Yeah, I would just add there's a little bit of an aesthetic component to it as well. So it kind of gives that look of a little bit more of an arch structure without really building an arch structure. Kind of opens up the view, especially, in this case, it's over the trail.
Okay, thanks. And my second question is, again, just curious, what's the lifespan of a K-frame bridge? The average lifespan of a K-frame single support bridge?
Well, again, I'll start off with that one. The list that I have here, again, these are just similar bridges to the one we had on Fern Hollow Road. And they're a two girder system. So we have some other K-frame structures out there that are multi-girder systems. And again, it's really a product of, the maintenance associated with it. So we have some on this list that are, 1965. So, it kind of puts it just a few years younger than me. Again, over time with maintenance and things like that, we can get some longevity out of these bridges, but it does take maintenance. It may take some painting. And again, as soon as I say that, Andrew, and then you got to realize, some of the bridges have a weathering steel component to it as well, which don't require rating, any kind of regular painting, I should say.
And I'll just add, it's not specific for the K-frame, but just to kind of give you a general sense is that, the general design life that was considered for much of these bridges was 50 years. And we find as it's aging, we can generally get more life. The average life we get of a bridge is around 75 years. But it does depend a lot on the situation, exactly what Mike said, the type of materials that was used, the maintenance that was done on it, in those along the way. But again, there's a lot of times there's that discord between, how much dollars there are to be able to replace those, if you will, at say 50 years. So there's always the desire to see if we can stretch more life, if you will, because of those restrictions.
Yeah, and let's not forget too, the total traffic volumes really weigh into that as well.
Thank you. We're going to go to John Poyster from WHJB. Okay. Catherine Rubright, Pocono Record.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could talk more about what sort of safety factors go into closing down a bridge when it gets to that point.
But yeah, I'll just start off again. I think we have a little bit over it might be in the high 300s of bridges, both state and locals, that are closed. So obviously the process is a bridge is posted, it goes through its next inspection, or over the next couple of years. The lowest you'll see postings out there is about 3 tons. And once we feel that the bridge is no longer capable of carrying even a 3-ton load, then obviously it becomes posted. Melissa, you may want to add just a few more. There's a few other reasons why we do that as well.
Yeah, kind of what I said before, if there's immediate threat to the structure, I mean, we actually give our inspectors instructions that if they see anything alarming such as that they immediately pull a vehicle in front of the vehicle, shut it down, even if it's a different owner of that bridge. And make those contacts to see what has to happen to be able to safely carry that traffic.
Thank you. This is going to be our last question. Joe Jasek, WJPA. Radio. Julie Green from the Herald Mail.
Thank you. Yes, I have a couple questions. I'm wondering, with the inspections, the number of inspections you have to do, what kind of backlog is there on the inspections? And second, when the inspections are conducted, does that include the condition of the supporting ground and possibly erosion occurring?
Yes, and I guess no to the first question, yes to the second question. So there is no backlog. There's actually a very tight, this is tightly controlled. We have to report out to the federal governments with regard to, we have to have those inspections done on the month that they're due. So we monitor that. We have staff that are sending out reports constantly on which ones are due that month, and then which ones are actually achieved that month. So that is, we stay on top of that. There are no backlogs of inspections. We've got inspection teams all over the state. The second part, that we evaluate the condition of soil and that around the structure. Yes, that's part of what's called the substructure. That again, the inspectors are there evaluating what they're seeing there. If it's overwater, say, that they're looking at, is there any deterioration underneath the support structure of the bridge? That's called scour, that Mike talked about before. They're measuring that to see if it's growing over time. So yes, that's thoroughly investigated as part of the inspection.
Thanks. I think Sean had a follow-up question.
Well, my colleague Ed Blazina also has a question as well, but my follow-up relating to the posted limits, when you were talking about that, do you mean just state bridges that's the process? Or were you speaking to how it should play out if it's a city-owned bridge or locally owned bridge? And
it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter who owned it. Yep, it's the same process.
Same process. And related to that, can you talk about that relationship? If it's a locally owned and maintained bridge, you mentioned early on that the state also has oversight of those local bridges. My understanding is that it's, in this case, so let's talk about any city or local, they are responsible to pay for and hire the inspectors. In some cases, I guess they have their own bridge inspectors, but here in Pittsburgh, they do not. Then that recommendation based on the inspection goes to city engineers about what they're going to do, whether they're going to post a weight limit or do something else, if they're going to make repairs. At what point, with a locally owned bridge, a city-owned bridge, does the state get involved? What is your role with those?
I think you're muted there, Melissa.
Yeah, I was, thank you. So yeah, the city, exactly as you described, so the city will get that report from their inspection team. That'll go to the city's engineer. They will review it. There will be a QC evaluation to make sure that everything was done accordingly. And at that point, it will get submitted to central, to the department. And then the department will receive that. And then we've got the responsibility of accepting that. So if we look at it and if there's something that we don't agree with, we can certainly flag that and turn it back. But it's an acceptance role at that point, specifically for the load ratings.
Hi, I have a question. I didn't know if anyone was going to follow up on that. I'm Mary Lee Williams. I'm from WESA. So over the course of the last several years, billions of dollars intended to go to road and bridge repair went to state police. How much has this harmed PennDOT's ability to address the infrastructure needs of the Commonwealth?
I think that's difficult to answer as you stated it, but I will say, first and foremost, the police have an important function that they do on our roadways, whether it's in enforcing the weight restrictions that we put on our bridges, keeping our speeders down, of course, DUIs that threaten everybody out there. So they play an important role. But of course, if there was funding that could be found for the state police out of other sources, those are dollars that could come right back and be used on the roads themselves. So what exactly that has been over the last few years, I don't have that exact right now. I'm sure we can get that for you. But it does, again, those dollars can't be spent twice. I guess I'll say it that way. So with all those needs, it certainly wouldn't be enough to meet all of our needs, I'll say, on the roads. But of course, any dollar we have, that's what we're doing. We're getting it back on the highways and the bridges to make those investments in the infrastructure.
Yeah. Deputy Secretary of Planning Larry Shiflett says PennDOT faces an annual gap of $8 billion. So, how can that be the case then if you're not able to address as many needs?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So, again, when you just look at the needs across the state, again, now we're even going beyond the I'd say the status of the infrastructure. So today, obviously, we're talking about bridges. We're talking about poor bridges. The other component of this, though, is capacity. So we have a lot of older interchanges along our interstates. We have a lot of interstates that traffic has grown over the years. So, I think most of us would say, let's just talk about an example like I-81, through central Pennsylvania there. The District 8 kind of has majority of that region there. Did a study a few years ago, and it's about $3 billion to add a lane to I-81 from the Maryland line over to I-78. Again, that's how that number is that kind of a project would be factored into that $8 to $9 billion gap. Now, again, for us, we don't have that kind of money. You're not looking at doing a 89-mile widening of I-81. So we're just trying to put our resources where the most critical needs are, and a lot of times that just comes down to the overall condition of our infrastructure, whether it's a road or bridges, safety issues, things like that. And I'll go back to one of Melissa's earlier comments. We do this in conjunction with our planning partners across the state. So, and obviously with Federal Highway.
Okay, thanks everybody. I know we're over time. I appreciate your patience. I know there are a lot of folks we didn't get to. If you have a question and you didn't get a chance to ask it, please reach out to our office and we're happy to get you a response as soon as possible. Again, thank you all so much for that. Melissa, Mike, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you all.